Thank you so much, President Veazey, President Savage, and President Shaw, for your visionary leadership in directing the community of Christ toward becoming a community of peace. To all of you here tonight, to those of you who are listening, I cannot tell you what this means to me, to my father, to my husband, to our family. We share the same historical roots. And that you would recognize my work as part of your community of Christ. I hope you understand what that means. I'm particularly moved by your inspired counsel. In the Doctrine and Covenants, section 163, creating pathways of peace, generosity, justice, and peacefulness through the vision of Christ. I can't tell you what it means to read, quote, "The earth lovingly created as an environment for life to flourish, shudders in distress because creation's natural and living systems are becoming exhausted from carrying the burden of human greed and conflict. Humankind must awaken from its illusion of independence and unrestrained consumption without lasting consequences. That this be your inspired counsel, that this be now a part of your sacred texts, gives me so much courage to know that there is a progressive religion here in the United States, here in Independence, Missouri, here on this planet. This is hope. This is finding beauty, creating beauty in a broken world with great accountability and compassion. I want to especially thank Brad Martell and his wife, Lori, for the fellowship we have felt just in these 2 days, that we have felt throughout this year since Brad called to tell me of this wonderful recognition. We've been contemplating this gathering for almost a year, and such love surrounds these two, as you well know, from each other, from their family, from you, the community. And Brad, I want you to know personally how much I honor your leadership in making this connection between ecological integrity and spiritual integrity. That you, with this ministry of peace and justice, really are providing a model for what our future looks like today, here and now. It is such a privilege to be in this beautiful building of this spiral, and I think it is how we naturally think as human beings, spiraling in contemplation, spiraling out with our actions. And Brooke and I and my father, John Tempest, on behalf of our family in Salt Lake City, are deeply honored. My father said to me years ago, "Terry, I'm so glad you have a hobby." And my writing has become my passion. And it's my passion because it is my father who really translated his love for the natural world into my love for the natural world, and that I can now share that with my husband, Brooke. These are these ever-widening circles of home. Today I had the privilege of being taken on the most beautiful tour of this temple by Kathy Loving. She took me into the meditation room, and as she began to talk about the sister city in Japan and this beautiful meditation garden, my eyes looked, and there I saw the painting of a woman in partnership with a man, a husband and wife, laying their hands on the head of their child together. And the tears, I could not stop weeping, because coming from a tradition where women are not yet allowed the priesthood, I realized how vital this is, how vibrant this is, how simple this is, how necessary and radical this is. And in the most beautiful conversation I had with Becky Savage, We share so deeply these bonds of women, nature, Christ, earth, our deepest wounds, our deepest triumphs in our spiritual life. My mother, before she died, said to her two granddaughters, Callie and Sarah, 3 and 1, before you die, I hope one day you too will be able to hold the privileges of the priesthood. Today I saw what that vision looks like. Today I felt that vision. And what a privilege it was to be able to have lunch today with historian Mark Shearer and theologian Tony Shavala Smith to discuss our common history, where we took separate paths. And I loved when Tony said to me, you know, we have a dissenting gene. What I would say to you, the community of Christ, is I share that dissenting gene. Peace, peace of mind. If women are at peace in their homes, then their homes and their communities are at peace. This is the making of peace throughout the world. One of the great peacemakers on earth passed away on September 25th, 2011, Wangari Maathai. I would like to remember her tonight and recall her spirit, evoke her spirit. She was the first African woman and the first environmentalist to receive the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004. Wangari, as you know, started the Green Belt movement in Kenya. I had the privilege of meeting her when I was 29 years old. Nairobi, 1985. I stood inside a large terracotta pot, holding on to the trunk of a ficus tree to gain some elevation and reprieve from the crush of crowds at the UN Decade for Women. In these cacophony of voices, one voice stood out. Her name was Wangari Maathai. It was a voice unlike any I had heard before. It was brave, it was passionate and informed. And when this Kenyan woman spoke, it was about doing something simple, something positive, something real, like planting a tree. I listened. I learned how African women were carrying the environmental crisis on their backs, spending 8 to 10 hours a day in search of firewood for their families so they could cook their food. I learned how forests were being burned for charcoal as fuel, more efficient than wood, and as a result, denuding the hillsides, creating erosion. It became clear in listening to Wangari how environmental issues were economic issues, were ultimately issues of social justice. In that moment, my life changed. If women are suffering, children are suffering, empower women and you empower the community. A revolution was lit inside me. I left the conference and I followed Wangari into the villages of Kenya, where I witnessed for myself the work of women and what it means to grow a forest. I watched women gathering seeds in the folds of their skirts, planting seeds and tending trees on their knees as if in prayer, their hands patting the soil to secure young roots. Not only were they planting trees, but nurturing hope. With time, the women could sell their seedlings and earn an income for their families. Hands on the earth, restoration was being tilled. Wangari Maathai's leadership was the pragmatism of joy. We are all uplifted by the growth of a seed. The women in the villages were finding their voice. Planting trees became more than a vocation. It was an action against oppression and a metaphor for renewal. Land health, human health, healing the earth, together. When women work together, everyone benefits. This was my introduction to the Green Belt movement. Wangari Maathai became my mentor and my friend. The power of her optimism fueled mine. Her voice not only inspired me, but called me to action once I returned home. We started the Green Belt movement of Utah. It was a way to draw similarities between deforestation in Africa and desertification within the Great Basin of Utah. Both landscapes were degraded by the removal of vegetation. In Africa, it was the cutting of trees. In the American Southwest, it was overgrazing by cows. And in both situations, valuable topsoil was disappearing through erosion. I engaged Mormon women within the Relief Society, an organization, as many of you know, within the LDS Church that exists for service and sisterhood, beginning roots in Nauvoo. We could collaborate between continents, I thought. I gave hundreds of talks in relief societies and book groups across the state, retelling the story of deforestation and Wangari Maathai's efforts to plant trees, woman by woman, village by village, to ease the burden and oppression of women, while also taking care of the earth. I was simply passing on what I witnessed in Kenya to the women in Utah, my own home ground, and inviting them to help. For $10, a woman could purchase a tree in the name of someone they love. We had certificates designed and printed. It was a campaign to educate and engage. My mother and my grandmothers were among the first to enroll. Brooke's father was moved by the effort. We went to lunch. A man of respect and rank within the hierarchy of the church, I asked him if he might help us by introducing me to one of the 12 apostles who could make this fundraising venture among local women in Utah expand worldwide. I knew what this could mean to the Greenbelt movement in Kenya. Nobody can organize like Mormons. His generosity was sincere and pragmatic. I love my father-in-law. And his interest was more than I could have ever imagined. He said he would be happy to call one of the brethren, a friend, and see if he would listen to me and give me a chance to make my case before one of the elders in power. But there was a catch. You know what I have promised to do for you, he said. Now here's what you can do for me. Promise me you will bring Brooke back into the church and keep this conversation between us. I thought about the women in Kenya struggling to find their independence. I thought about Wangari Maathai and her unflinching ferocity in the face of institutional power. What would she do? I sat in the center of a very long silence in the middle of our lunch. It seemed like such a simple proposition. I can't make that promise, I said to my father-in-law, whom I love. What he didn't say, but what I saw in his eyes were, that's a shame. You could do a lot of good for a lot of women in Kenya. My father-in-law unknowingly had forced the issue of integrity. Mine. I realized I couldn't have it both ways. Use the Mormon Church's influence for what I wanted, with my father-in-law's help, yet be unwilling to help him with what he wanted most, his son to attend church, without me speaking of what we had agreed upon. It was a Faustian bargain. Brooke was his own sovereign, and so was I. The restriction I would be under as a Mormon woman asked to remain silent would undermine whatever good I was trying to accomplish for Kenyan women. My compromise would become theirs in principle. My belief in my own religion was being tested. I would raise the money myself, with other women, no strings attached. We raised $10,000 for the Greenbelt movement in Kenya. It wasn't a lot of money, but it came $10 at a time, one woman committing to the prosperity of another woman freely. Peace, peace of mind. If women are at peace, there is the making of peace in the world. I think of the Thread Project by Terry that hangs in this beautiful temple. Threads pulled from the fabric of people's everyday lives from 7 continents to create one world cloth, the work of women in community. I think, Kathy, of your beautiful mosaic, taking that which is broken and creating something whole. We must learn to speak the language women speak when there is no one there to correct us. Helena Siksu. I am now 56 years old. When I turned 54, that was the age my mother was when she died. This is what I remember. We were laying on her bed with her mohair blanket covering us. I was rubbing her back, feeling each vertebrae with my fingers as a rung on a ladder. It was January, and the ruthless clamp of cold bore down on us outside, yet inside, Mother's tenderness and clarity of mind carried its own warmth. She was dying in the same way she was living, consciously. "I'm leaving you all my journals," she said, facing the shuttered window as I continued rubbing her back. "But you must promise me one thing, that you will not look at them until after I'm gone." I gave her my word, and then she told me where they were. I didn't know my mother kept journals. A week later, she died. That night, there was a full moon encircled by ice crystals. On the next full moon, I found myself in my family home, alone. I kept expecting Mother to appear. The silence that followed her passing was disorienting. Her absence became her presence. I longed to hear her voice. Now, it was the right time to read her journals. They were exactly where she said they would be. 3 shelves of beautiful cloth-bound books, some floral, some paisley, others in solid colors. The spines of each were perfectly aligned against the lip of the shelves. I opened the first journal. It was empty. I opened the second journal. It was empty. I opened the third. It was empty, as was the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. All of my mother's journals were blank. I do not know why my mother bought journal after journal year after year and never wrote in one of them and passed them on to me. I will never know. Now, almost 25 years later, I didn't realize how young she was. But isn't that the conceit of mothers? That we conceal our youth and exist only for our children? Placed in a circle of immunity, it is the providence of mothers to preserve the myth that we are unburdened with our own problems and carry only the crisis of those we love. We mask our needs as the needs of others. If ever there was a story without a shadow, it would be this, that we as women exist in direct sunlight only. When women were birds, we knew otherwise. We knew that our greatest freedom was taking flight at night when we could steal the heavenly darkness for ourselves, navigating through the intelligence of stars and the constellations of our own making in the delight and terror of our uncertainty. What my mother wanted to do and what she was able to do remains her secret. We all have our secrets. I hold mine. To withhold words is power, but to share our words with others openly and honestly is also power. We get to choose. I was aware of the silences within my mother. They were her places of strength, inviolable. Tilly Olson studied them. She writes, "Literary history and the present are dark with silences. I have had special need to learn all I could of this over the years, myself so nearly remaining mute and having to let writing die over and over again in me. These are not natural silences, that necessary time for renewal lying fallow gestation in the natural cycle of creation. The silences I speak of here are unnatural, the unnatural thwarting of what struggles to come into being, but cannot. We hold these silences as a personal crucifix. What is voice? I will say it is so. The first voice I heard belonged to my mother. It was her voice I listened to from the womb, from the moment my head emerged into this world, from the moment I was pushed out, then placed onto her belly before the umbilicus was cut, from the moment when she cradled me in her arms. My mother spoke to me. Hello, little one. You are here, I am here, we love you. I will say it is so. My mother's voice is a lullaby in my cells. When I am still, my body feels her breathing. Tonight, I honor my mother, Diane Dixon Tempest. I honor my grandmother, Letty Romney Dixon. I honor my grandmother, Catherine Blackett Tempest. I honor my great-grandmothers, Valette Lee Romney, Florian Kazare Blackett, Mamie Comstock Tempest, Louis Mabon Dixon. They blessed us in the privacy of our homes by their laying on of hands. The women in my family taught me to listen as well as to speak. The women and men in my family taught me to see the beauty of the earth, even wildness, especially wildness, not only as the handiwork and imagination of God, but as a part of an intact world, harmonious and whole. They may not have used the word ecology, but it was this study and love of home that has brought me ultimately home to you in Independence, Missouri. Family, community, an honoring of the Spirit. If my work as a writer and teacher has engaged in peacemaking, it has only been because of my love passed on through those I love of this beautiful broken world. Finding beauty in a broken world is creating beauty in the world we find, and it is poetry. Each of us has a voice. How we choose to use our voice in the world becomes a personal decision, each in our own time, each in our own way, with the gifts that are ours. I want to thank you, and especially thank you, Mr. Brandon. Wes. This $20,000 prize, I want to tell you where it's going. It's going into the hands of students, for the students in the Environmental Humanities program at the University of Utah, so that they can better tell their stories. A story is the umbilical cord that connects us between the past, present, and future. It keeps things known. To tell a story, it becomes the conscience of the community. We are going to be working with students in Rwanda who are desperate to tell their stories, students of the genocide, who were children during that war. We met with them. They have cupboards of unpublished poems. They have trunks of unpublished novels. They want to share their stories. With this gift from the community of Christ, we will be able to put American students with Rwandan students, with different mentors from around the country, so that those stories can be told. Louis Gakumba, one of the Rwandan writers who helped initiate this program and who has now become part of our family, told me the following story. There was a woman who was married to a pastor. It was a happy family. Some people say they were a family of 6. Others say they were a family of 11. The woman was away, and when she returned, she saw how the Interahamwe were butchering her children on the ground along with her husband. After the war, the man who murdered her family came back from the Congo, and when Gachacha called him to explain what he had been accused of, he said, "I accept everything I have been charged with, and from the depth of my heart, I apologize." The woman said, "I saw everything that happened. I know you killed my family. I loved my children and my husband. I am now alone. I have nothing. But I choose to forgive you and to take you into my home. You will live with me, and I will do whatever it takes to make you feel like my own son." Can you be in the same shoes with this woman? Louis asked me. I remember when we were where we were standing when he told me this story, and together we looked into the Congo past Lake Kivu, where he was born. Rwanda is struggling with peace one person at a time, he said. This is as hard as growing wheat on rock. We are finding our way toward unity and reconciliation on a walkway full of thorns, and we are walking barefoot. We are trying to forgive, Louis said, but to forgive is to forget, and we cannot forget. Perhaps there is another word. I am searching for that word. Peace, peace of mind. Each of us has a voice, and we get to choose how to use it. Each of us chooses to use it differently, each in our own time, each in our own way, with the gifts that are ours. Finding beauty in a broken world is creating beauty in the world we find. Making peace is making a mosaic. Shards of glass can cut and wound or magnify a vision. Mosaic celebrates brokenness and the beauty of being brought together. A wooden cross, your wooden cross, 100 pieces of wood from individuals home ground, 300 pieces put together, a cross of peace, celebrating the resurrection, not the crucifixion, earth and spirit combined right here, right now. Our survival, the vitality of the planet, depends on a mental flexibility and emotional acuity. It also requires a discipline and joy of the spirit. Hands in prayer, hand raised, hands put to work. We can improvise. We can create without a map, and we don't have to live in isolation. The gift of an attentive life is the ability to recognize patterns and find our way toward a unity built on empathy. Empathy becomes the path that leads us from the margins to the center of concern. The pattern is the thing. The beauty made belongs to everyone. We all bow. Wangari Maathai planted trees. My mother left me her journals, and all her journals were blank. We all begin with the empty page. Perhaps our most profound voice is found in silence. Peace. Peace in prayer. Finding beauty in a broken world becomes more than the art of assemblage. It is the work of daring contemplation that inspires action. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.